Okay, so as you know from the bio, Ness and I are really grateful and really thrilled to have Susan on this episode because we're always talking about and looking at how do we thrive in business and in life without the burnout. One of the big conversations that we have with clients is about understanding, is our energy optimal or is our energy leaking? And the reason for that is because it has such a flow on effect. You know, you can look at time management, you can look at the best time management skills, strategies and techniques in the world, but it does not make a difference if you're not actually performing and feeling and being optimal in your energy. And there's a flow on effect in so many different areas of business and in life. And so when we invited Susan on to chat with us today, hello, Susan, we're so excited to have you here. One of the big questions that we really wanted to start with was actually understanding, how do we know if we are at or on our way to burnout?
It's a very good question, and it's one that I try to ask when I'm initially working with a client, and quite often I get a very different answer to what their biomarkers tell me when we actually run the testing and look at how their stress hormones are functioning. And a lot of us are not really cognizant of how much we're taking on board, how much we're taking in, and where our stress response is taking us numerous times a day. So that's where, I ask the questions. People tend to think they're pretty chilled out and they're cruising. And then actually, you could be firing off cortisol multiple times a day that's totally off the charts, or you can feel like you are pretty stressed pretty easily and lacking resilience, and you're really hypo functioning and you're really running on empty. And so it's very common to see that low stress response and burnout in females from midlife onwards. Not to say I don't see that in the other sex, but I work a lot with women who are obviously spinning lots of plates for decades at a time, and we don't have an infinite reserve of stress hormones to see us through to the end of life.
I really resonate with that. And I think, there are different seasons and phases we go through, as we grow older. And some of that can look like childbearing, and it can look like, caring for family and starting a business or having a career. And it just, this way of living and working and, this hustle culture that we talk about, that we kind of want people to move away from, it does get to a point, I think, where it just feels normal. And
Absolutely.
just not having energy feels normal to people. It's like sitting down in front of TV with your eyes half shut, maybe a glass of wine you think you need to unwind, and you get up and do it all over again. And at some point, that's just not going to keep working for us. So what do you see, Susan, as probably the marker, or what's the turning point for people when they come to you, when they're at that point?
Yeah, that's a good question. Usually they're really sick of feeling their worst. And somebody's idea of their normal, I like to really set them up for expectations for a much higher baseline than where they're operating from, especially when we have that initial round of test results come in, because I do so much testing in my consulting work, so that we take a look under the hood at what is happening internally. And I can see, like, once we get that topped up, once we balance that, once we reverse that, like, you're not going to know yourself. And so, energy that they were giving me as a 7 or an 8 out of 10, it's like, nah. And so it's really sad that there are people I see who come to me well into their 50s, or even people in their 30s, who are just like, why didn't I do this sooner? How have I not been tracking how my body's been operating all this time? And I could have felt better a long time ago too. So it just gives you the edge, knowing this stuff and being able to address it with a really snazzy toolkit.
Mm.
I can talk about, from personal experience, because we did some work together. We are working together. And last year, it was probably not so much coming from a perspective of burnout, but more around some chronic illness and all the past kind of, I don't know, you get to this age and it's sort of like you've picked up some stuff along the way, right?
Absolutely.
And I remember you asked me to really assess at different times of the day where my energy level was. And what I come to realize was that I was what I was calling a 7 out of 10. Somebody with a lot of energy and good health would rate that maybe a 4 out of 10.
Yeah.
And it was just this belief that I've always felt like this. So therefore, that's just normal, and understanding that there is a way out of that. And I wonder how often we do that with our health, but also with the way that we approach our work. This pace feels normal. This amount of work feels normal. This amount of exhaustion feels normal.
Yeah.
So what are the implications of not taking action?
Yeah, I, as a reformed workaholic and perfectionist, can totally relate to that, and I think you can keep operating that way. But as I said earlier, you haven't got these infinite reserves, and there will be a moment where your body goes, "Hey, this whole danger system, stress response, fight or flight thing was set up for you to use in 40-minute bursts at a time until you got to safety." We now harness that and use adrenaline all the time. Like we are in a perpetual adaptation stage. If you look at the Hans Selye model for stress, we're meant to just use the alarm stage and then kind of go back to rest, but we don't. So adrenaline runs the show. And with that, we tend to see other hormones get thrown out and neurotransmitters get thrown out, because all of the nutritional cofactors required to make adrenaline are getting churned through pretty fast. And if you're not eating very well, you're not putting back in what you need. And so you end up pretty depleted. And so, like, I saw a client today and I'd seen all her bloods and everything was just low. And I just said to her at the start of the call, I feel like I just need to put you to bed for 6 weeks and feed you chicken soup and like just give you time off to convalesce. And she just wasn't even registering. Like, her normal was to run around and look after other people and work and all these things. So I think the thing I'm trying to really drive home with my clients, particularly business owners, entrepreneurs, thought leaders that I work with, is get out of the busyness trap in the first place. And so if we can break that cycle, for me, that's the circuit breaker around reimagining the way you do work and doing, I'm all about success with ease. You don't have to push so hard in order to get the results or see the growth. I think you do you and look after you first and foremost, and then your work and your business, that stuff just comes. And I really believe that. I think that is something it's taken me a long time to embrace, because I would just force things. And now I'm much more, just do you, go with the flow, look after you.
I resonate so much with what you're saying there. And I know, this is why we do what we do as well, because it is about breaking that busy trap. And I'm reminded of, it's kind of like, if you don't go to bed early, or if you don't go to bed at a good time, if you don't have good sleep routines, and then expecting to wake up super early, full of energy, and can do your morning ritual, etc. It's not about waking up well, it's about going to bed well. Mel Robbins did an Insta story recently about this, where, going to bed early is a power move. Imagine if we actually took on going to bed early as a power move. It's the same thing. If you can focus on getting out of that busy trap, then you don't have to go down the road of burnout and be in this space. It's so much easier to change those habits, to break those cycles earlier on. And when I say easier, sometimes the simple things, they're not easy, but they're so important. And it is about those habit making and changing, aspects. Such an important conversation. I think definitely over the time we've worked together as well, Susan, I'm very grateful, because I can see the journey as someone who over the last 10, 15 years has been trying to and practicing breaking these cycles of burnout. Still here I am breaking cycles. It's not a one fix, a one, you do it once and that's it, it's done. So what are some practical tools, mindset hacks, resources you think that can help our listeners and us break those cycles of that busy trap early on so it doesn't get to that point of burnout?
That's a really good question. I think that constant learning and having to kind of revisit the lesson in different iterations is very common in a certain cohort of the population, and they tend to all be cut from the same cloth. They're all real go-getters. They all raise the bar so high and their standards, are just right up there. And so there's in the work I do, I'm actually routinely testing those types of clients for biochemical imbalances that mean they're probably building up some excitatory neurotransmitters in the brain that just mean they rev a lot harder than the average person does. And so the light side of that is success and high achievement, and they're the CEOs, they're the book writers, they're uber successful. But the dark side of that is, if you aren't really managing those excitatory neurotransmitters and their output well, it looks like poor stress tolerance. It looks like anxiety, depression, burnout over time. So you've got to be able to really manage your biochemistry well. And I think the first thing you can do is just go and see someone that's going to thoroughly investigate and be able to really glean the right information and interpret that info correctly to help you get the edge and work better with your body and the makeup that you've got and the genetics that you've got, right? And to know to listen to yourself. But the other thing is, like, sit down with your diary and go, okay, what do I start saying no to? What do I delegate? Where do I get support? And take the load off yourself, because you can't do it all.
Yes, that seems to be a real common theme in conversations at the moment. I love how you said the edge. And I feel like the type of person that you're describing, which is definitely our listeners, there's a real proactiveness to find the edge in business and find the edge in whatever task it is that you're doing. But what about finding the edge in your body, in you, in your health and well-being? Like, I love that. That's a really great way to look at that approach. And it is listening to yourself. But the challenge is sometimes we think, like we've said, we think everything's okay, but the quantifiable evidence that you can give through, those biomarkers, and that's just a blood test, isn't it? When you talk biomarkers,
a lot of that is just general pathology run at your local collection center. Like, it's just the way we interpret that data. And we do some more exotic testing where it's needed, but just really good, thorough general path lab stuff is what we're talking about. I think too, like, as you were saying, the edge, I went through my Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week productivity ninja era a long time ago and wanted to hack and fold time and stuff. And I'm well beyond that now. And I'm more about getting the edge in the sense that you just know what you need and what your kryptonite is, and that's going to be very different for you, Nikki, and you, Ness, than it is for me. And for some of my clients, I'm like, that one thing that I want you to do is eat fish 4 times a week. And they're like, why? And I'm like, because there are 4 things going wrong in your body right now that tell me omega-3s are going to be very, very helpful from a food as medicine strategy.
So we don't have to guess our way through it.
Exactly. And you don't have to listen to all the misinformation or the bombardment of information from a wellness industry that's launching into being a $7 trillion industry soon. That's just preying on our fears, even if we're just the worried well. But imagine being unwell and all this messaging at you. And how do you discern what is good for you in amongst all that, right? So I'm all about you have a very unique presentation. Your genetics play a role, your environment, what you put in your mouth, how you live your life, and what's going on internally. All of those things together create a very individualized prescription. So unique health solutions for unique people. So that's my version of healthcare that I think works the best.
And I personally relate to that so much, because over the years, I've always been interested in health and, what can I do to improve it, and how can I eat well, and all of that kind of stuff. But I've often in the past followed programs that are generic. And then I go and I go hard on that. I remember I went to see Tony Robbins a few years back, and they talked about, the benefits of not eating meat. And so, I'm going to become a vegan. Well, maybe not. I'm going to become a vegetarian. And so for 12 months, that's what I did. And my energy levels went down to the point where I needed an iron infusion, because that didn't work for me. And then it sort of started this awareness around, well, all these other things have these, it's just everybody follows the same diet pattern or the same exercise pattern, or, the same kind of way of eating or being. But that doesn't take into account my intolerances and what I need in my body. And so that's sort of where it's helped me arrive at the point to understand that individualized assessment is really important. And I can relate this back to work, because I think about my beginning of my business, my previous business, just going out there doing all the courses, all the things, like just throwing money out to be educated on how to market and how to do this and how to do that. And it was generic. It wasn't actually solving the problem that I had specifically in my business. And I think that's why, this year, particularly in the last 12 months or so, where Nikki, you and I have become really focused on who we listen to and what we actually do in the business, it feels like that approach that you're talking about, Susan, that individualized approach, is the one that's working for us the best. And I wonder, at what point in business do people have to come to that realization that personalized support, what time in life, is actually far better than trying to chase the cheaper thing that you do as an online program on your own or something like that. So trying to fix your health on your own, trying to avoid burnout on your own. The results can be so much more fast paced if we get help, right?
Absolutely. And I think, I can relate to the business example as well. There've been programs and mentors and things I've done where there's a bit of shiny object kind of to it. You're like, oh, everyone's doing that sales course, and it's like, that's not what I need. I don't sell. Like, I just do me, and people will come to you if they need you. And so you get much clearer in business around what you particularly need as an individual, and then getting the mentor that's already been there, done that can fast track that for you. Why wouldn't you engage and get that advice, right? Because it's going to save you a lot of time. And it's the same in health. Like, everyone's on the intermittent fasting bandwagon. No one's eating before midday, just drinking black coffees. Now, that's not for everybody, particularly if you're pretty kind of highly strung and go the second you wake up in the morning. It's highly likely that your morning cortisol levels are off the charts, and you need to eat some protein within half an hour of waking up, not pouring coffee down your gob and going even, more intergalactic on the nervous system level with, I'm getting stuff done, but I'm kind of a bit jittery and I can't sleep at night. Like, everyone needs something different. Everybody has a different kind of diet. Not everyone should be keto, all that sort of stuff. So bespoke's the way to go.
And I think I'm just going to add as well, there's no shame in, like, if you're listening and you're thinking, it sounds great, but there's something stopping you from reaching out for help or to start a conversation, think about what's stopping you. Like, it could be a feeling of shame. It means I don't have all my stuff together. I'm letting someone down. It could be you feel like you don't have time. There's so many reasons of what will be stopping you from taking that first step. Really reflect inwards about what that is. What is stopping you? Because this is, again, it's about you being your optimal, healthy, happiest, best self. And if you are that, then you are showing up so much more for the people around you, for your family, for your, friends, your clients, your colleagues, etc. So I think just if there's anything coming up around, oh yeah, great, that's good for you, but, or someone else, but what? What's the next thing that comes out of your mouth? Yeah, if you were to ask that.
And Susan, what would you say are the barriers that people talk about with you in relation to working on their health?
It's a good question. I think putting others ahead of themselves, like just not prioritizing their own well-being. The busyness, like I'm just too busy. And I get that. Like, I think people can feel like I don't eat well enough, and I'm embarrassed to tell you. And I'm just like, people turn up to consultations like it's confessional. And I'm like, that's not what this is about. Like, this is be really upfront, be really honest, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's a really safe space, I hope, that I'm always creating. And know that this is going to take time, and it's management, and we've got to communicate about what's overwhelming and what's not, and how much you can take on. And you've just got to kind of have a really collaborative relationship, but with everyone's head in the game for you to get the results you're after. So there's nothing to be concerned about. Everything is very figure outable, and everything is achievable, when it comes to functional health issues.
I love
And it's
that.
also never too late. I feel like that's important to say. It's never too late to take that first step.
Absolutely.
So when it comes to taking the next step or the first step or whatever that is, if somebody's not quite ready to see a health professional yet, and is sitting in that place of wondering whether, oh, I'm listening to this and I'm thinking maybe I am on my way to burnout, what's something practical that they can do for themselves to really help gauge, actually, I do think I need to go and get some help one-on-one, or maybe I can, start to cut back on what I'm doing in order to get out of that busy trap. So what would you say would be the if you're resonating, but you're not sure what to do next, but you're not ready to talk to a health professional, what could somebody do?
Yeah. I feel like we did all the wellness tips to death during the pandemic, when everyone was just trying to kind of not lose their and so I think sleep is king. Like, I've maintained that sometimes sleep trumps nutrition. So even if you're not really able to kind of get it together around food for whatever reason, like carb craving, reaching out for sweets, there's always reasons behind that. Often it's because we need energy, or we need a mood boost, or, there's some addiction stuff going on there. So I don't really care too much about nutrition. I care a lot about sleep. So Mel Robbins has got it right around, be particular about your sleep. Get yourself to sleep. That 2 hours before or more of sleep before midnight is the best quality sleep you're going to get. You're raising your dopamine levels as you sleep. You're doing emotional first aid while you are dreaming. You are able to take everything off the USB stick you learnt that day and put it on the hard drive for your long-term memory bank. Your brain is actually getting a shampoo while you're asleep. You give, there's a whole system called the glymphatic system that is cleaning your brain for the next day. So that is the thing that I would obsess about. And if it's just the one thing you do, is get your sleep right.
I love that.
I love the way you described all of that. It's so good.
It makes me want to go to
Writing
bed.
down emotional
Totally.
first aid, shampoo my brain. I did hear a term the other day, dirty brain water is a thing. So I wonder if that's connected, but I don't remember enough about it.
Very potentially.
Yeah, that definitely, and I do think that, and sleep is something that I probably have focused on for the past, before COVID hit, and it was just that whole thing around understanding that one thing and getting really deep diving into what's stopping me from sleeping well. How am I sleeping? How much deep sleep am I getting? How much of the REM? All of that kind of thing. So you can sort of go down the little rabbit warren of understanding that. Definitely having the evidence base to prove that alcohol and late nights do not equal good quality sleep.
And the personal
So,
experience to prove it
personal
as well.
experience.
Been there, done that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I feel like that's a really great practical way of helping people to understand what they can do. So that's a first step, because I actually agree that, you know, all those wonderful things you talked about that happen to you and your brain and your energy levels, with a clear head, we can make better decisions. Never have I made a great decision on lack of sleep. So that's an awesome way to start. But in wrapping up, if you were to suggest one action that our listeners could do within the next 24 hours, which may relate to the sleep thing or not, but what would you say one action we could do to help break this cycle of, you know, leading towards burnout, of over stimulating ourselves, of using all those sort of like energy banks instead of focusing on good health and thriving? One action to break that cycle.
No, it's just another one of those cliche things we've all heard before, but very powerful, is to meditate.
Okay. And even if it's just 5 minutes,
Even
like,
if
is
it's
there a
5
time? Do you have
minutes.
to set aside a whole
Yeah,
hour?
most people suck at meditating. You're meant to. Like, that's how meditation works. Use guided meditations. Like, don't go deep into, I'm just going to focus on my breath, in, out, in, out. That might do your head in, and you're going to keep losing track and thinking about the shopping list. But give your brain a break. Like, 95% of our thoughts are junk, and we don't even give our brains a break other than when we sleep. So if you can just give it 5 minutes, 20 would be nicer, twice a day. But, you know, even I can't even get to that. And I'm just, you know, embarking on making it a very regular, like I brush my teeth, part of my day.
Love
Yeah.
that so much. Great advice. Do you
Yeah.
meditate, Nick?
Yeah, look, over my life, tap in and out, being more consistent, less consistent. So I'm going to take this on, and that's going to be something I focus on now as well, getting back into that. But I also think with meditation, I had a meditation coach for a little while, teacher. And one of the things that she really also taught me was, you know, like you said, you don't have to just sit there with nothing. So you could do guided meditation, but even it could be going for a walk, and a mindful walk, but not for the purpose of going for a walk, a little wander. I've mentioned this before. Look at the leaves on the trees, look at the blades of grass. So she also talked about that mindfulness, and I don't know what your thoughts on this are as well, Susan. That mindfulness is a form of meditation. So if it's too challenging to sit down and just, you know, close the eyes, even with the guided meditation, other forms of mindfulness, like that little stroll around the garden, bare feet on the grass, but really mindful, can be another form of meditation to introduce and start to build the muscle. Thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. Anything that's going to help you be present of mind in your environment, and yeah, less focused or less allowance of the mind chatter that is a constant thing, and then marrying that up with being in green space like that. We know forest bathing is a whole therapy in and of itself now.
Yes.
We know the connection to our nervous system that it has in calming it down. So I mean, I start every morning with a walk outdoors with my dog. And for me, that's been a form of therapy and a way to kind of get through the pandemic, and it helps things become a lot clearer when it comes to decision making, and just, yeah, building it in as a habit in some ways is a really good idea.
I love
We
it.
also
So,
have sorry, Ness, we've got a podcast episode, the 5 practicing the art of doing nothing, 5 ways to practice the art of doing nothing. So if you haven't listened to that one already, go ahead and make sure you download that, because that would be such a nice follow-up to this conversation.
absolutely. So there's been so much gold that's come out of today. Thank you for having us, Susan. If anybody is interested in having a discussion with you or following you or getting to know you, what you do better, what's the best way for them to get in contact?
If you jump on my website, just susanhunter.com.au, my contact details are there, and I'm on socials. You'll find me. Don't know the hand.
Wonderful. Wonderful. We'll make sure that goes in the show notes, and we will wrap up here. And thank you so much.
Thank
Have a great
you.
rest of your week. Bye.
Thanks.